was a cynically premeditated and planned act of terrorism before, on and after New Year's Day. That is, precisely on the holidays. They will use them primarily to cause terror, because there are doubts about their effectiveness when used in a combat zone.
The Russian state media does not report for the general public on the possible missile delivered from the North Korea, because such reports would directly contradict to the official narrative about so-called incredible successes of the Russian military-industrial complex.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Analytical, and I'm your host, Matt Wickham. And in this episode, we will discuss Russia's recent missile attack on Ukraine, North Korean ballistic missiles, and scenarios for future attacks. In recent weeks, Ukraine has faced some of the most technological advanced and widespread missile attacks across the country following months of Russian reconnaissance missions, in which they used Shahed drones for scoping out the land. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Solovian, revealed how Ukraine's air defense successfully intercepted all 10 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, which Putin had previously claimed to be untouchable. Solovian highlighted the potential devastating impact on civilians, if not for Ukraine's air defense and support from Western systems like Patriot air defense. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video, and don't forget to press subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any other videos in the future. Our first expert of this episode, Oleksandr Kovalenko, military and political observer, Information Resistance Group, discusses the extensive use of missile strikes and drones by Russian forces in Ukraine during the new year, emphasizing the synchronized tactics involving kamikaze drones with various missiles. He highlights the premeditated nature of these attacks, suggesting they were carefully planned as a deliberate act of terrorism to instill fear and pressure during the holiday season.
The Russian occupying forces used the tactics of combined missile strikes on the territory of Ukraine just before New Year's Day, on New Year's Day and after New Year's Day. For this purpose, they used various weapons, including not only ballistic, supersonic and subsonic cruise missiles, but also Shahed 131, Shahed 136 kamikaze drones, which played the key role. They combined very different destruction means with each other and synchronized them to the greatest possible extent. Their raids and strikes were maximally synchronized with each other, and almost always the first wave of attack by kamikaze drones was followed by cruise and other missile strikes after a minimal interval. Minimal pause before the subsequent entry of Russian missile weapons into the airspace of Ukraine. That is, the Russians were preparing in advance for these attacks. They have been stockpiling K-101/555 and ground-launched Caliber cruise missiles since last September. All this indicates that they have been preparing this terrorist act since the fall. It was a cynically premeditated and planned act of terrorism before, on and after New Year's Day. That is, precisely on the holidays. Such a raid, such a blow cannot be prepared and planned in a day or two, even in a week. It should be pointed out that during almost the entire fall, the Russians mainly used Shahed 131 and 136 kamikaze drones against Ukraine. They used them in order to scout out the most effective routes, flight trajectories in our airspace, so that these means of destruction were in the airspace as long as possible. That is, beyond the reach of our air defense systems. Unfortunately, we do not have enough of these systems to provide a safety buffer. And there are always some blank spots, some gaps, through which these means can penetrate our airspace. They use, for example, areas with complex terrain, with forests, swamps, river mouths and lakes, along which, for example, our mobile interception groups cannot move. In this case, only air interception groups can save the situation, but we do not have them today. So this rather complex plan was developed solely in order to exhaust our air defense forces, in order to distract their attention, to cause terror, and put moral and psychological pressure on Ukrainians during the holidays. The Russians will not refrain from inflicting such strikes on the territory of Ukraine in the future. So we can expect to see a repeat of at least two scenarios. The first scenario is with the use of a really large number of different missiles, different nomenclature, different purposes, with the support of kamikaze drones, that is, an equally massive strike. Or they can resort to the second scenario, which we already saw last May, June, when they used a limited range of missile weapons, 15-20 missiles per strike, but could afford to launch these strikes almost every 48 hours. In this way, they will be able to terrorize Ukraine for a long time with a relatively small number of missiles. Of course, there will be kamikaze drones attacks almost every day, every evening, every night. Their use has become systematic almost every 24 or 48 hours.
With reports of Russia having ballistic missiles from North Korea, the question arises, what does this mean for Ukraine? How reliable are these missiles, and in comparison to Russian missiles, how do they fare? Oleksandr has doubts that these would surpass Russian missiles technology, considering much of North Korean's missile technology is based on that of Russia's. Let's take a listen to more.
It all depends on how North Korean missiles meet their specifications. I doubt it, because North Korea claims that their specifications are even better than those of Russian missiles. At the same time, North Korean missiles are based on Soviet, Chinese, and Russian missiles. How can it be that such a technically and technologically backward country made missiles better than Russian ones? Whereas Russia, which provided them with these technologies during this time, did not improve the same Iskanders, so that they had a larger operational range, striking range, etc. Therefore, there are doubts about their specifications. But the fact that Russians will fire these missiles at the cities and villages of the near-rear zone, the same Kharkiv, for example, or Sumy, is really true. They can fire these missiles even at Zaporizhzhia. They will use them primarily to cause terror, because there are doubts about their effectiveness when used in a combat zone.
Next, Volodymyr Solovian, head of UCMC's Hybrid Analytical Warfare Group, notes the Kremlin's subdued reaction to reports of employing North Korean missiles. Kremlin's propaganda tries to portray itself as a formidable manufacturing power. If they were to admit to the use of foreign missiles, it would expose a weakness in meeting missile orders, something the propaganda has vehemently denied throughout this war. Plus, Volodymyr talks of the dangers of a new, upgraded Iranian missile being used by Russia in Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
The Russian state media does not report for the general public on the possible missile deliveries from the North Korea, because such reports would directly contradict to the official narrative about so-called incredible successes of the Russian military-industrial complex. However, war correspondents close to the Russian Defense Ministry are actively commenting on the news. It is worth noting that unlike in the fall of 2022, when Russia attempted to conceal the use of Iranian-made drones, the Kremlin is now subtly hinting that the Russian army has indeed received Korean missiles. North Korean missiles pose a threat to Ukraine due to the lack of missiles defense capabilities of shooting down targets on a ballistic trajectory. The potential strikes of North Korean missiles at greater operational depths where Russian Iskanders cannot reach is rather alarming. At the same time, weapons that Pyongyang could transfer to Moscow cannot hide surprises for Ukrainian anti-aircraft fighters, as the North Korean missiles arsenal is based on Soviet and Russian developments. At the same time, the weapon that Pyongyang could have transferred to Moscow cannot hide surprises for Ukrainian anti-aircraft fighters, as the North Korea's missiles arsenal is based on Soviet and Russian developments. Furthermore, the presence of North Korean missiles does not automatically tip the scales in Russia's favor, since the North Korean industry is unable to manufacture a large number of missiles and launcher systems in a short period of time. Therefore, Russia can use a batch of North Korean missiles in order to exhaust Ukrainian missile defense system. This is how Russian army use outdated and extremely inaccurate Soviet Ha-22 missiles. Moscow is trying to buy time to accumulate a missile arsenal by attracting missile weapons from Iran and North Korea. In this context, the alarming news is a recent confirmation of Russia's use of new modification of Iranian-made drone Shahed 238. These UAV have a jet engine and reach speed of 500 km per hour, which is more than 3 times faster compared to Shahed 131 and Shahed 136. Since September 2022, these two types of drones are the main resources of Russian drone attacks on the operational depth of Ukrainian rear. In comparison to its predecessors, Shahed 238 has several advantages. At first, fast arrival time. Secondly, its ability to fly at high levels and quickly dive. In this way, Russia found a relatively cheap substitute for cruise missiles, which can be used massively against Ukrainian military and civilian infrastructure. If Russia expands the use of Shahed 238, then Ukraine will have to reconsider the tactics of mobile groups of drones hunters, which are mainly armed with anti-aircraft guns. Now they have to be armored with the various main portable air defense systems, such as Stinger. In this situation, Ukraine needs more Western anti-missile defense systems. The passivity of Western politicians and military-industrial complex in the issue of assistance to Ukraine leads to deepening of military-technical cooperation between Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang. The lack of investments in Ukraine's security may lead to destabilization on other parts of the Asian continent.
Our last expert of this show, Ivan Kyrychevskyi from Defense Express, talks about the challenges in acquiring long-range missiles from the West, questioning why those calling on to help Ukraine aren't in fact helping Ukraine with this issue. He highlights a gap between political discussions and actual aid received by Ukraine in military-industrial matters. Let's take a listen.
Look, Radoslav Sikorsky called out the West to provide long-range missiles, and no one here asks, firstly, what long-range missiles, because Storm Shadow and Scalp are the maximum long-range weapons that the West can give us, on which we can screw something somewhere and shoot. This is the maximum. And secondly, why doesn't Poland take the initiative? Look, we have a stockpile of cruise missiles exactly for the F-16. Let's be the first, and you, the Americans, pull up. No one gives. It's a kind of anabiosis when you have to react somehow, but no one wants to do anything. Another example is when Frau from the German Bundestag called so pathetically Scholz, give Taurus. And we said yes. How correctly she said. And no one asked the question that Pistorius, I mean the German defense minister, asked that Frau, including through the media, that first the money for the new Tauruses and then the old go to Ukraine. But the Bundestag Defense Committee doesn't seem to do anything. In other words, Europe seems to be in some political anabiosis, although in military-industrial issues some gifts are constantly coming to us.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Analytical dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find more information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!